Sinclair Broadcasting is the largest owner of local television stations in the country, including several here in New England. But the company's conservative bent and unusual editorial practices are drawing increased scrutiny, all as it tries to grow its reach even further. No, you're not suffering from double vision.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This Deadspin video shows news anchors across Sinclair stations all reading from a common script.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda.
That so-called promotional script, criticizing fake news in the mainstream media, was force-fed to local stations as a must-run, stirring outrage that Sinclair is the one pushing an agenda.
That's not our tradition in the United States. It smacks of propaganda.
Sinclair was already under scrutiny for must-run commentaries that seem to echo President Trump's talking points.
The media coverage of this administration seems to be a lot of hype and very little substance.
College isn't a babysitting service. It's time to grow up, snowflake.
For its part, Sinclair has dismissed the criticism, calling the must-runs no different than network programming.
Sinclair Broadcast Group Executive Chairman David Smith defended the videos to the New York Times. He calls them, quote, standard practice in the industry.
But forcing local on-air talent to all read the same script crosses a new line, and it comes as Sinclair seeks to expand its reach even further.
The company wants to buy Tribune, a merger that would put its stations in 3 of every 4 households in the U.S.
While the FCC says it's reviewing the Sinclair-Tribune deal, there's one person who wouldn't mind seeing it go through.
On Twitter, President Trump called Sinclair far superior to other media companies and mocked those who criticize Sinclair for being biased.
Maybe that's why people are so suspicious of Sinclair. You got to give David Smith, head of Sinclair, some credit here. He is taking this on full voice. So this is standard practice. So he's comparing it to network must carries. Like if you're an ABC affiliate, you have to carry the ABC Evening News. You have to carry the primetime programming. He's saying this is no different. This is a must carry. Also, you think he's forcing the anchor people. I don't even know how they got into it. Now this word, I mean, usually it's an editorial person like, Bill Fine from Channel 5. If David Smith himself had read the commentary and made it a must-carry, that's one thing. But to force your news people, it is absolutely unprecedented.
That's right. Well, listen up, snowflake.
An idiot.
I've said this before, but what bothers me isn't so much that they are requiring the anchors to read this propaganda, because these things happen. What bothers me... Well,
not like that.
Not like that. Not like that. The problem is that we have a regulatory regime that allows one company to own soon to be 200 plus stations. If we return to a normal regulatory regime where there were serious limits on how many stations one company could own, where there was a requirement that ownership be local, once you do that, let them do what they want.
It's not going to happen.
Let them do what they want.
Yeah.
The problem here is you combine the propaganda with more than 200 stations. And it's not like CNN or Fox or MSNBC. You tune in, you know what you're getting. You tune in your local news station, you're not prepared to get this.
Yeah, I mean, kudos to Deadspin for putting together that video, because those segments had aired over the past month, and it took someone putting them together to make them look like, a propaganda film, and getting the huge attention that it did. I think Dan is right to point to deregulation and mass ownership was something that wasn't possible before, but I think it's also interesting to think about local television in a different regulatory way. If you're talking about newspapers, you're talking about the internet, if you're talking about cable television, there is no regulation from the federal level, because you can always start another cable channel, you can start another newspaper. Local television stations are allowed to license spectrum that is owned by the people of the United States, and as a result, traditionally that has come with regulation. In the old days, it was the Fairness Doctrine, but it's not very easy to go start another broadcast television station. It's not something that you can do. So there's an extra reason why local television stations have to not allow propaganda to rule their news.
I think I do have a problem with forcing these anchors, news anchors, to read commentary or whatever the front office wants them to read. To your point earlier, Emily, where there were at least two other cases where commentary was woven into local newscasts. I mean, there was a lot of blowback on that. Yeah. It was controversial, but you can almost understand that because it isn't part of the anchor team. It isn't someone that a community embraces and trusts, that the words that are being written and delivered are part of that news organization, that operation, right? It's commentary. It comes from outside of the area. It's separate. But this is different, right? People are watching these anchors every night. They invite them into their home. They're very connected to them. All of a sudden, they see something like this, and you have to pause and say, oh no, what else is being fed to them from corporate headquarters?
But how do
and I
they
think
even
that's
know?
the problem.
Well,
they know now.
Yeah,
I mean,
because they didn't say, by the way, this message from our corporate bosses.
They did not say it, and that's why it was so powerful. You're right. This is a story that's been out there for a while. Now you see it compiled like that, which shows the power of editing and video and sound. But now the public knows, and that trust could have been lost.
They were like the Borg. If you're a Star Trek viewer, it was like that's what it reminded me of. But there's a media literacy question too on the part of the viewer, because you're right. The viewer, is seeing this from maybe a trusted source, and does the viewer have the wherewithal to say, "Wait a minute, this sounds a little off"? How is the viewer evaluating this? Fake news has become this kind of funny term that's been bandied about, and it's come to mean, I think, news that I don't agree with. There is this real question of media credibility and understanding the source, and I think you're right. When you're watching MSNBC, when you're watching Fox, you do understand there is a point of view baked in, and you kind of accept it, whether you agree with that point of view or you're kind of hate viewing it. If you're watching the local news,
view. It's a new term, isn't it?
I've hate viewed some news before. But if you're watching the local news, do you have enough faith and trust? Do you know these anchors? Do you understand that this feels a little off character for them?
By the way, there was a hidden message here because they were talking about fake news, but they were talking about things that they don't believe in. Like the owners are really pro-Trump people, and so for them to position it that way, he was trying to say, "Oh yeah, we're talking about things like Pizzagate," and think, "No, you're not."
But it was well written. Yeah. I mean, the way that they wrote it, it was very difficult to find fault in the broader memo.
Every sentence you could agree with, but
you could. But then there were right. You knew, but it was hidden in there, right? So you could stand back and defend it and say, "Well,
that's why they didn't want any of the anchors messing with it. Right. You got to read it word for word."
It's futile.
Well, it was dog whistle commentary.
There you go.